second. I just want to introduce Father Gary Thomas right now, and then he will come up when Father Jeffrey is finished. Father Gary Thomas is a priest of the Diocese of San Jose. He's been a priest for 28 years. He served as high school chaplain, which I believe is a very good preparation for his current ministry. And he is now pastor of Sacred Heart Church in Saratoga, as well as being appointed exorcist for the Diocese of San Jose. And in his spare time, he talks and works with other exorcists at getting started and helps them in those first steps in the ministry. We'll be hearing first from Father Jeffrey Grob, and Father Jeff will be speaking on the reality of the evil one and the human person.
How many of you were here for the first session? Ah, you poor buggers. You're gluttons for punishment. I'll pray for you, I promise. As always, like we did the last time, allow me to give you some context. As Father Bill said, the topic is the reality of the evil one in the human person. From the first letter of Peter, chapter 1, verses 17 to 21. In prayer, you call upon a Father who judges each one justly on the basis of his actions. Since this is so, conduct yourselves reverently during your sojourn in a strange land. Realize that you were delivered from the feudal way of life your fathers handed on to you, not by any diminishable sum of silver or gold, but by Christ's blood, beyond all price. The blood of a spotless, unblemished lamb, chosen before the world's foundation, and revealed for your sake in these last days. It is through him you are believers in God, the God who raised him from the dead and gave him glory. Your faith and hope, then, are centered in God. As a result of what God has done in Jesus Christ, our baptism has forged us into a primary relationship with God in Jesus Christ through baptism and through the blood of the Lamb, what 1 Peter talks about. But I'm guessing that we all know, be it from our own personal experiences, but also in our encounters and experiences with the people who come to us in whatever capacity, whatever category, depending upon our various ministries. And we talked a little bit, at least earlier, some of the various categories of the folks that are here. We may have added some new ones during the break. But be it our personal experience, be it our encounters with others, other relationships can be forged. Relationships that are not with God. And that's what I want to spend a little bit of time talking about, as far as the relationships that we forge. Majority of you were here earlier for the 1 o'clock or the 12 noon session, and we talked about that, in a sense, temptation kind of being, in a sense, the ordinary means of struggle, and the means of grace, also the means of challenge, And that however we work with that reality, whatever relationship we choose to forge, a relationship with the divine through sacramental living, through holy living, through that, all of those things, we move Our trajectory is towards eternity and blessedness, holiness. But I'm going to spend this short 25 minutes talking about the forging of other kinds of then relationships, not the ones that are directed or oriented towards God, but the ones that are oriented away from God. And I'm simply going to draw from my own experience. I was assigned as an apprentice to my predecessor in Chicago in January of 2003. And then due to health issues and the like, my predecessor had to resign his post in 2005, and I was appointed as exorcist for the Archdiocese. Anniversary coming up soon, October the 7th of 2006. And since then, the majority, not all, but I would say the majority of cases I've dealt with of people who have some kind of engagement with the evil one tend to fall into one of three categories. And the reason I offer the categories is perhaps it can be your own experience, perhaps it's helpful in you trying to look at what are entry points, what are doorways, possible doorways. And the three categories or the three groups I'm going to give you, it's not a guarantee. It simply provides, it's the possibility for the condition that something might develop. A relationship with the evil one may come about as a result. And so, the first potential seed, if you will, and the first two of the three are going to be obvious, but maybe not. The first is a pattern of sin. And when I say a pattern of sin, I differentiate that from a habit of sin. As you know, or may not, but when we talk about habit, specifically in moral theology, there is a lessening of culpability, a lessening of responsibility. If a sin has become truly a habit, because it has its own, the nature of habit and how it weaves itself into our lives. Not to say that it's invincible, not to say that we can't overcome it, but there is a lessening of one's freedom and choice when a sin has become habitual. I'm differentiating that now to talk about a pattern of sin, in a sense where this is a sin that someone has openly and willingly given themselves over to. A particular sin where they not only commit it, they quite enjoy committing it and have no desire to stop committing it. And so as a result of this pattern, other things begin to deteriorate. Their spiritual life begins to deteriorate. Their access and choosing to access the sacraments, in particular the sacrament of penance, and then eventually the Eucharist and everything else begins to deteriorate. It becomes a doorway. It becomes an invitation, potentially, to the evil one to enter into the dance. Because we know that sin is not born of God. And so that would be the first. At some level, pretty basic and simple, if you will, or obvious. Second, and again, an obvious reality I would think, is a direct interaction with the occult. And that can take place on all kinds of levels, and Father Gary and so many others who work in this field can speak to this as well as people on staff, who have had dealings with cult activity and the occult. But it's real. That's the thing. What makes it cunning by the evil one is that there is a level of unbelievability about it. That's the packaging that makes it so frustrating to help people to overcome the way it's packaged by life and the evil one. Say, oh, come on. It's 2012. You know? Who dabbles in those kinds of things? Who, you're going to worship Satan? He doesn't even exist. Why are you going to worship him? That's what you're talking about. But yet, it's real. I mean, you can go online and in a couple of clicks become a card-carrying member of the Church of Satan. There's all kinds of other wonderful things that are so readily accessible, so much that is all neatly right below the surface. In Niles, Illinois, a suburb of Chicago, a location that has regular animal sacrifice and satanic worship.
Catholic Church.
People who believe just as real in the evil one as we believe in Jesus Christ. And again, it's kind of like, oh, come on, get real. And yet the facts prove it. I mean, someone I have the pleasure of speaking with frequently or working with, sharing the dais frequently is Father Dennis McManus, who teaches, well, now at the seminary in Boston, but he continues to teach at Georgetown University and part of the Dominican House of Studies. He's much more an expert than I as far as the working of the reality of cults. But things, you say, how does this happen? A case in point. In 2003, in January 2003, I was working full-time in the Office of Canonical Services for the Archdiocese, and I received a call from a cold case detective in Toledo, Ohio. And they were in the process of opening a cold case it took place on Easter Vigil of 1980, in which a religious sister, Sister Margaret Ann Paul, was ritually murdered in the sacristy of the chapel of a Catholic hospital in Toledo. She was preparing the chapel for the Easter Vigil. It was Saturday morning. It was the day before her birthday. She would have been 73. And despite what would eventually be the trial, despite the defense's attempt to say that this was a random act of violence, this good sister was strangled to the point of unconsciousness. She was laid out in front of the Blessed Sacrament, because where does our dear Lord usually end up in that time between the conclusion of the Good Friday service and the beginning of the Easter Vigil, usually in the sacristy of the chapel in some reverent place? She was laid out on the floor facing that. The altar cloth had been taken off the altar, had been folded in half, had been placed across her chest. Some sharp instrument was used to stab an inverted cross across her upper chest 31 times. The end of the object that was used to stab her, which was emblazoned with a pentagram, was dipped in her blood and signed on her forehead. Her habit was hiked up. Her foundation garments were lowered. She was penetrated with something. This is just the tip of the iceberg. And there she died. It's ritual, you know. She had to be alive for the sacrifice. So a person is strangled to the point of unconsciousness. The blood has to flow. But we know our belief in the importance of the blood of the Lamb and how it continues to flow in us. Always an inversion the sacred.